every opportunity I've had has come from my content. If you're in sports media, start posting content. Like ESPN found me from TikTok. Podcast stuff, most people call my podcast because they've seen it before. They've seen me on my clips on social media. They haven't seen it by watching the whole thing. They've seen it from clips going viral on social media.
The number one, tight end in the country.
Adam Brenneman, tight end, Cedar Cliff.
And then popped up.
Touchdown! Adam Brenneman, a 14-yard strike.
So when you first started your podcast, how hard is it to build that reputation to get guys like Jaycee Horn on the podcast?
The reputation, I think once you land a couple big-time guests, it helps you get other ones. My first guest ever was Kenny Pickett, who ended up being the first quarterback picked in the draft. I've had Jared Goff, head coaches, athletic directors. So once you get those guys on, it's easier to land guests because people, number one, they're comfortable and know you're not going to screw them with anything you ask, or you're not going to, ask them anything that would shine them in a bad light. And then it just gives you that credibility of having done the interview. Kenny Pickett was just, kind of lucky. I've known Kenny for a while. I obviously I played, so I know a lot of the guys, or they know of me because of my, content and broadcasting stuff. But yeah, I think you just got to land a couple guests. Like, and that's, I know it's easier said than done, but you got to get one or two big ones, and just you can end up reaching out to 250 people and maybe 2 respond. But those 2 guests that you got. So it's a numbers game. You just got to get a couple guests on. It kind of goes from there. And in today's day and age of sports media, athlete-driven media is a big thing. So a lot of times athletes want to do podcasts, especially athletes that aren't like A-list, but are maybe more like an offensive lineman in the NFL starting, like someone who's not Jaycee Horn, right? Wasn't a first-round pick, not like someone who maybe was like a 5th-round pick, and they want to go get their name out there and brand themselves. So a lot of times guys want to do it. We turn down people all the time for the podcast, to be honest, because we don't. We want someone who brings name recognition, who's going to do well on YouTube and get a lot of views. And if someone is like an average NFL player, we probably won't have them on the podcast, to be totally honest with you, because it just doesn't. Our cost to produce it is too much. We don't get anything out of it. So there's definitely a threshold to how you get there. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah. I just wanted to know, what specifically do you do to make your podcast different? Because obviously the whole industry is shifting podcasts into a big new thing. What specifically do you, want out of this, and what do you want your brand and your podcast to look like? Yeah,
good question. I guess what makes it different, I think there's a few things. Number one, like me as a host, I have what few hosts have, is like the credibility of having played and having relationships and knowing a lot of the guys. Being able to get guests that's what it's all about. When you're, especially like an interview style podcast, you're only as good as your guest. If I do an interview with someone who no one knows, it doesn't do well. If I do an interview with Jared Goff, it gets 100,000 views on YouTube. So it's just about getting a good guest. A lot of the reason I do the podcast is for the social media clips, to be honest. I'm sitting on this as I do the interview, and I'm thinking in my head as he's answering, like, oh, that's going to be great on TikTok. Like the story he told about like his welcome to the NFL moment when he saw Christian McCaffrey and he like juked him out and didn't make the tackle in practice. Like, great TikTok clip. That's what I'm thinking right away. Because that's how you get exponential views. Like, we may get this podcast, we may post it on YouTube, in 48 hours it may get 15,000 organic YouTube views, which is good. But we may get 5 million on TikTok and Instagram and YouTube Shorts and Twitter. So a lot of it is for that. I think the more consistent you can do the podcast, the bigger guests you can get, just the more it grows. And I will say, like, the reason a lot of people do podcasts and the reason YouTube's such a big thing is because podcast viewers are very valuable to brands. Brands would prefer to have, like 10,000 YouTube subscribers is way better than 100,000 TikTok followers. Because YouTube, people that watch your YouTube are loyal followers. They believe in what you say, and if you try to sell them something, there's a higher chance they're going to buy it. So the podcast, even if you don't take over part of my take, or you don't become, well, I'm not trying to be, I'm never going to be the Full Send podcast or the Pivot who like can get 20 million views on every episode. But if I can get 50,000 views on each episode, like that's very valuable to brands, and brands will pay to be part of that. So yeah, hopefully that answers your question a little bit there.
Just one short thing too is for someone who's trying to maybe start a podcast that's not, hasn't played in the NFL, doesn't have those kind of connections, what kind of tips would you have?
I mean, I think you got to decide what kind of podcast do you want to have. If your podcast if your strategy is to have on big time guests, that may not be a great strategy because you're not going to be able to get them. I mean, just to be honest, like your podcast may have to be more of like you breaking things down or analysis or team specific podcast or there's a variety of different angles you can go. Mine just so happens to be I have conversations with big time athletes because I feel like I can get guests to come on it. Or if you decide that's really what you want to do, you just got to grind it out, like I said, and you got to get a couple guests that may be mid-tier and just build out the list. And when guys come on, you ask them, hey, who else do you know that would want to do this? Connect with agents. Like a lot of times agents want to get their guys on shows too. Again, they're not going to be big-time guys. They're not going to be A-listers. But if that is the route you want to go, you just got to grind it out, send 500 Instagram DMs and just reach out to literally every single person and hope that a starting middle linebacker in the NFL will come on your podcast and then just take it off from there.
Once again, I just want to appreciate you letting us sit in here and listen to the podcast. It's really entertaining. So just to introduce myself, my name is Aster Singh. So transitioning from football into the media side of things, where do you find that kind of dopamine release or the rewarding feeling from media? Where does that really stem from?
Live television definitely gives it to you. Like when you're on live TV calling a game, that's probably the closest thing you get to like actually playing football. When you're on live TV, you got a headset on, the producer's in your ear, and like you can't mess up, and like everyone's listening to every word you say. That's the adrenaline rush you get. I mean, I get it a little bit from podcasting, but like, more so it's the live TV stuff, like the actual like getting nervous and like getting that rush. For me, the podcast stuff's fun because you get to, number one, connect with people, have really cool conversations. This was a little bit of a different setting because you guys are here, right? Like doesn't feel as intimate as it normally does when there's a crowd watching. But a lot of times, like, I'll do a podcast and we're just like chilling on a couch with like a microphone in front of us, and you get guys to say some wild stuff that they don't normally say, right? Yeah. Because they forget that the camera's there. They're just rolling and they're swearing and they're like, and you get them to talk about this stuff and tell stories and do some really cool stuff. But like I enjoy that because you get to know guys really well. You get to have deep conversations with them and you just build relationships. Like every guy that I've interviewed, like I've become good friends with. Like I never met Jaycee until he walked in here today. I went to find him, and like when he was leaving, he's like, "Yeah, I'll hit you up later." You know what I mean? Like now, I'm probably gonna become a friend now because of that. So you just get to like build connections like that, and the connections help you in every part of life that you're in when you're in sports media. Like it's all about relationships in sports media.
A lot of athletes replicate their game or try to emulate the game of players they've seen in the past. Broadcasters do it as well, I'm aware of. Who are some of the people that you looked at and kind of taken pieces of to improve your on-air personality?
Another great question. Oh, you guys got great questions. On-air personality, there's two guys that I watch all the time, Herb Street and Joel Klatt. I think Joel Klatt's probably the GOAT of college football analysts on TV right now. Those guys are great. I watch their film. I mean, broadcasting on TV is like you watch film just like you do when you're playing. Like you got to watch yourself. Everyone hates to hear themselves talk, right? Everyone hates it, but you got to do it. I remember the first time I had to listen to myself call a game. To be honest, when I started broadcasting games, and I've done it for a year now, my first like 5 games, I didn't rewatch them at all because I didn't want to. Because I knew the parts I messed up, and I knew when I did well. I didn't want to rewatch them because it's like terrorizing to watch yourself. You're like, why the hell did I say that in that moment? But then I didn't really get much better until I started watching my tape. And I was like, oh, like I missed such an opportunity right there. Like I could have explained that so much better. Or like, oh, I totally like blew that. Or that was a great comment. I got to do more of that. So I started watching film. So then I also watched Joel Klatt, Kirk Herbstreit a lot. As far as like television studio stuff, I think Ryan Clark's probably the best at it right now. I mean, he does such a good job of like being the analysis guy, being the personality, the hot take guy. Ryan Clark's really good. And then from a content standpoint, honestly, like who I model my content model from is Gary Vee. I mean, like I follow like what he does on social media, where he posts like 45 times a day. Like I post literally like probably 20 times a day on social media, across Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Snapchat. We're posting tons of content. And that's the model I followed. I'm not sure anyone really in college football media does it. And I was just talking to someone, I forget who it was. I was saying, asked me about getting into media. Everything I've done has come from social media, and I really have learned that from Gary Vee and his model of how he just posts tons of content. And I'm a big believer. I don't overthink content. I think sometimes people get into analysis paralysis where you're so worried about posting good content. How do I look? Is it edited well enough? I just post. And I may not like what I said in a video. I may think I don't look good. I may I didn't deliver that very well. I post it, and the algorithm dictates if it's good or not. If it sucks, no one's going to see it anyway because it's going to get 50 views. If it's great, it gets tons of views, and you're happy. So I just post content. Some videos don't do well. Some videos go crazy, and I just live with it. It's just don't take yourself too seriously. I view every piece of content I post as like an at bat. It's a chance to go viral. Every time I post, I got a chance to go viral, a chance that a producer at Big Ten Network's going to see it and call me about an opportunity, a chance that a brand's going to see it and call me about a big brand deal, a chance that I'm going to get a speaking engagement from it. It's just an at bat. That's why I post a bunch of content.
So a lot of people, when they watch a podcast or they see your show and other shows and stuff, they see the final product in the sense of beautiful stadium, nice equipment, mics and stuff like that. But when you're starting out, what's your investment process like? How long did it take for you to really build the equipment, the team, the software that you had that runs the show behind the scenes?
I did it a certain way, and there's many ways to do it. I invested money in it up front. I spent a few months spending a lot of money on content until it started to pay me back. Probably 3 months of spending a decent amount of money before I made any money. But I was lucky to be in that situation where I could do that. I will say, to start a podcast or to start doing content, you don't need the setup that we have here. This is a pretty high-end setup. We have 5 cameras rolling right now. We got a guy who walks around with a camera, and I'm mic'd up in 4 different ways. We got microphones on those cameras. There's 8 audio sources. You don't need all that. You can literally do a podcast. You can do audio only and just record it on your phone or with, buy these microphones are $200, right, Stevie? More? All right. Well, they have variations of they have variations of these microphones that are $500, but there's variations that are cheaper. You can get that, plug it into a laptop, and record a podcast with no video. You can shoot video on your iPhone. There's a bunch of different ways to do it, and you can just start ripping content. Take the podcast out of it. You can post content right now with your phone. You don't even need anything else. And I do some of my content is highly produced cameras, microphones. Some content I see a video, I green screen it, or I see a topic I want to talk about, and I just hold a phone and talk. That's what I do on some of them. So you can, and sometimes it's funny, the videos that I spend a lot of time on, and I'm this video is gonna crush. We spent tons of time on it. It gets 1,000 views, and then I'll pick up my phone and be can you believe C.J. Stroud's declared for the NFL draft, and film it in 30 seconds, and it gets 500,000 views. So you just you can start at any level you want, depending on what your financials are like, or if you have backing or a brand involved. There's no reason you can't start with very, very minimal investment.
Hey Adam, my name is Caroline Preston. I'm a recruiting intern at Mississippi State University.
Cool.
So I actually have a question more related to football. I was wondering, in your process for recruitment, as someone who was highly recruited, what was one of the best things that you found in some of your official visits, something that might have put a school over others? And what was something that maybe you could have went without during a recruiting visit that you think might have even lowered a chance to go to one of?
Cool job, by the way, recruiting at Mississippi State. Sweet, yeah. From an official visit standpoint, official visits are so planned out and meticulous, and they do everything to try to get you to come to their school. Everything from you get to the hotel room and there's a bunch of cookies and cards from every staff member and handwritten notes all over your bed. It's kind of weird, honestly. Literally, the head coach writes you a novel, and they give you letters. It's really an interesting process. That stuff is all fake, right? They're doing it for every recruit. They're doing it it's just the bells and whistles to try to get you to think they want you more than anything else. The part that I always valued was when you sat down with the head coach in his office, one-on-one. How much did you feel like he was real and authentic? Did you feel like he cared about you? Was he telling you the truth or just telling you what you want to hear? I committed to Bill O'Brien at Penn State. Bill O'Brien was the head coach at Penn State, now the OC with the Patriots. He was the head coach of the Texans. The reason I committed to Penn State was Bill O'Brien made me feel like he had my best interests at heart. He wasn't just telling me what I wanted to hear. he had a plan for me and spent a lot of time with me to make me feel like he cared and like was invested in me coming there. Bill O'Brien was telling me like, yeah, like you're good and we want you here, but like we don't need you here. We'll be fine if you don't come. Where so many schools are like, oh my God, I'm going to cry if you don't come here. Like the coaches say that kind of stuff. That's why I was trying to ask Jaycee what he was told. So I think that was the authentic nature that I was recruited with that got me to Penn State. But there's so many bells and whistles, like, those just the cars they pick you up in, like all different stuff that the reality, every school's doing it. They do it for everyone. Some guys are persuaded by that. And if they are, they're probably not like the right kind of mentality guys that you want at your program. So for me, it was always the authentic relationships.
Hi, I was wondering if you had any guests that just had a really hard time speaking and getting comfortable, and what advice would you have to make them really comfortable on your podcast?
There's been a couple settings I've been in that have been more difficult than others from a podcast standpoint. I think sometimes when you do like head coaches and athletic directors like I've done, they're always uptight and like you're in their office sometimes. And I mean, these guys have been there before. Like they just don't always want to, they feel like they're in like a real interview. And then when I sit down and I'm like, what's up, man? Like, appreciate you doing this. They're like, they kind of get caught off guard by it because I didn't like do a formal intro. As you guys saw here, like when we sat down, I didn't do anything formal. We just started talking. And part of that's strategic. I don't want to sit here and be like, welcome into the Brenneman podcast, like when I got Jaycee Horn here, because that feels like really staged and scripted. Again, it's a little different when there's a crowd here because like it's clearly staged and scripted. But I do think with the athletic directors and head coaches, when they're uptight, you just gotta very early on, you gotta connect with them somehow or make them laugh about something or like connect with them. With Jaycee, in like difficult setting to do a podcast and get a guy comfortable. As I said, bunch of people watching, bunch of cameras here. It's different than just being on a couch and talking. The thing I did with Jaycee really early on to try to connect with him was the Nick Saban part. I don't know if you remember that. Like he was talking about Nick Saban's office, and I connected with him by talking about my experience in Nick Saban's office, and I talked about the mahogany wood in his office. And at that point, like I felt he loosened up a little bit and like got more comfortable, and it was like, oh, he's been in the same spot I was in. So yeah, I think Jaycee like in the first 2 minutes wasn't super comfortable. I think he was like didn't know what he was walking into. He's got students here watching him and like cameras. I don't know what his agent told him, but I think it was that. I just try to connect somehow. You got to connect really early on in the interview with them to make them trust you, get familiar, and just get comfortable.
Hey there, Dana Goldberg. Thanks again for speaking to us today. I work in data analytics for the Cleveland Browns, and so from a numbers standpoint, how do you guys evaluate the performance of your videos? And then two, how do you use that evaluation to decide, okay, which videos or clips am I going to post on which social media platforms?
Another great question. So we spend a lot of time in pre-production deciding what the title of the video is going to be, what the title, and I'm talking the long podcast. When this goes out, it'll be an hour long. We had a whole meeting yesterday that our whole team was part of, our production crew, my editing crew, creative director, and we sat and talked for 30 minutes about the Jaycee Horn interview and what angle we wanted to go with it and what the YouTube title and what the thumbnail is going to be. And we have 3 options right now of like, and our team's already working on of like, here's what we think would go viral. And we've actually we back into a lot of videos from a data standpoint of we won't do something if we don't think we have a good title and thumbnail for it on YouTube. Because if there's no point doing it because it won't get any views, it won't get any clicks. YouTube's all about click-through rate, who's going to click on the video. So for Jaycee, like the angles were what it's really like to be a first-round pick was the one title. Something about the turmoil in Carolina. Like, what the heck's going on with the Panthers? Jaycee Horn tells all, something like that. What's it like to be a Pro Bowl snub? Something like that. And we literally have title and thumbnail picked out, and then we'll back into it where, like, it ends, we go watch the video, which one makes the most sense, what do we think is going to do the best? Sometimes we test it. I'll, like, post a poll on YouTube or post a poll on Instagram and be like, what title would you click on? And I'll show the titles, and we'll pick the one that does the best. We'll also change titles and thumbnails if it's not doing well. From a data standpoint, we look at click-through rate on YouTube. So we want to be 10% or higher. If people see it, they're clicking on it. If we're below that, we change the title and thumbnail. We test it after we'll check after 24 hours. If your video isn't doing well after 48 hours on YouTube, it's not going to do well. The only viewers will be people that I drive to it on social media, which may be a couple thousand, but it's not going to be, to get to the 50,000 views, 25,000 views, 100,000 view videos on YouTube, you have to get YouTube pushing it out on their platform. So that's the podcast. That's like the long form part. The short form clips, and when I say short form, I mean TikTok, Instagram Reels, the 30 to 60 second clips. We have a team. I have a guy who actually will watch the whole podcast and like write out the best parts of it, the best 30 to 60 second parts that would make good clips. Then the process is, what's the best hook for those videos? Because if you don't get their attention in 2 seconds on TikTok, you scroll. So we go and find the best hook for each of those clips. For example, sometimes it may just be the 30 seconds that the way it actually went. Like him telling about Nick Saban, it'll probably start with, I remember being in Nick Saban's office. That's a good hook, right? We'll just use that. But sometimes we gotta rearrange what was said to put a hook in the beginning of the clip. So there may be an example where he says something like, sometimes it'll start with my question, where I'll be like, what was it like being the first round pick? What was the pressure like? And then he answers. And that's just the clip. Or we may rearrange it where we take a part he said and he was like, oh, this is crazy. And we'll make that the hook. He'll go, oh, this is crazy. We put it in the beginning and then I ask my question and then he answers. So we'll rearrange what's said to make the short form clip more watchable and to get the hook part of it. Because if you don't have a good hook, no one's going to watch the video. So then each podcast will get like 10 short form clips from it. We'll just post them across every possible channel. And these turnaround time, like this will probably go live in 10 days to 2 weeks. Clips will start going out probably a little bit before that and then after, and we'll just keep recycling them and repurposing the content.
Hi Adam, I'm Jordan Atkins. First of all, thank you for being here. It's been a really unique experience. I think I can speak on behalf of everyone here. It's very interesting. You ended the podcast by asking Jaycee the best piece of advice that he's had. Do you have some advice to offer, maybe a quote or something that kind of gives you inspiration if they were to take one thing from today, what would that be?
I always love this because I get asked, like people turn the questions around on me and I never have good answers for the questions I ask. Being in sports media, but really it applies to everything, something I've learned as I've gotten older and that's helped me with like content, all that kind of stuff, is you just gotta not care what people think. And I know it's like way easier said than done, but especially in the world of social media, you guys should see some of the comments I get on my stuff. Like my friends sent them to me and are like these are hilarious. But people come at me, very small percentage of people, but they come at you. They call you a moron. The fact that you get paid for this is embarrassing. Like, the funniest stuff. They make fun of your appearance. Like they make fun of my career a lot. I'll get tons of stuff like, you didn't even play in the NFL. Like you were a failure, all this kind of stuff. You just gotta not care. At the end of the day, as I mentioned before, like you just gotta post content and let algorithm dictate it and see what's good. And when you don't listen to anything, you just don't get affected by it, good or bad. I think really early on in my career, when I was in high school, when I was playing college football, a lot of young people struggle with this. You get so caught up in what everyone says. And when you listen, when you get a lot of praise, you like buy into it. You're like, oh, I'm the shit. I'm really good. Like I got a lot of potential. Like I'm going to be really amazing. The problem is when you listen when it's really good and you buy into it, if something goes wrong, you also listen to all the noise. You listen to what everyone says. You listen to everyone hating on you. So you just got to block it all out, and it allows you to stay really level-headed. If you listen to it all, you go through these peaks and valleys of like you're really high and really low, really high and really low. So when you block it all out, you just stay level-headed. So I think that's a big thing for me is just like if you want to be successful, there's going to be people that come at you that don't believe in what you're doing, especially if you're in media. People are going to say, oh, he doesn't belong on TV. Why are you posting videos? You're ugly. You don't talk well. Like you just got to block it all out and believe in yourself and keep at it. And it's easier said than done, but if you can do that, success is going to come. And you're able to like keep your mind level throughout it all and not listen when it's good or bad.
Sure. Is that something that you are actively still working on? For
sure. I mean, definitely. I think that's the hard, as I mentioned, especially when you start to have success, the hardest part is not listening when you have success, is not listening to people tell you how great you are, how great you're doing, all that kind of stuff. Because as I mentioned, like, go back to my college career, I was a 5-star recruit, had every offer in the country, went to Penn State, was a freshman All-American, got hurt for 2 years. I was really listening to it when they were telling me how good I was when I was a 5-star recruit. I mean, every coach, Nick Saban tells you you're amazing. Urban Meyer's flying into my school to see me. Like, you're like, man, I got it figured out now. Like I'm pretty good. Like I thought I couldn't do anything wrong when I was 20 years old. I thought I was the man. And then really quickly, I got hurt for 2 years. The articles were like, Brenneman's never going to play again. Like what a bust he was, like all that stuff. And because I listened when it was really good, it crushed me when it got really bad because I was listening to all the outside noise. So again, I've learned since then to try to stay level-headed. You still are going to listen a little bit, but you gotta keep everything mentality-wise. You gotta go like this and not up and down like that. You gotta be like, when things are good, you're right here. When things are bad, you're right here, and you just kind of go through life like that. I think that's the biggest thing with young people I see is just too many times they get too high and too low and too excited and then too down when something doesn't work out. Oh, you got a call from the producer that you wanted, or an agent hits you up. You're like on cloud 9, and then they don't call you back, and then you're like crushed and depressed for 2 weeks. It just blocking it all out and staying level-headed through it all. But I definitely still work on it now because you just gotta block it out.
Awesome. That's something that I'm actively working on myself, but I do believe that you should give credit where credit is due, and you've done a great job today. And I think that the people here, like I said, they've taken something from it, and that you've made a difference to our program. So thank you again.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.